traveller. So all of the books are about the travelling community in Scotland. I don't know an awful lot about the English travellers, but I know that they have a history which comes out of India, which is very colourful and very painful as well. Anyway, here's the story that I promised to tell you. My mother and I was about, I don't know, how much bigger than 2 lasses here, and we were in Oban, walking along the shore in that place called Ganavan Sands. And she said, sit down. So I sat down for a wee minute and she put her hand in her pocket and she put something in my hand. So I'm going to tell you a story. And she says, and I want you to believe this story. No one will believe you when you tell them. She says, it doesn't matter because it's so far in the past, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. So she said, you know the story of Bonnie Prince Charlie and Culloden? I says, oh God, aye ma. She says, well, here's another version. You know, after the battle, she said, that they were trying to escape the Duke of Cumberland in the Highlands, not the border country. I'm talking to somebody for the border country, Alison, are you there? Don't take offence at this, it's not about you and I. In the border country, people fought on the other side, you know, and the Highlanders were getting pushed away and everything. So there was a lot of problems. Anyway, the biggest problem was to get Bonnie Prince Charlie, Charles Edward Stuart, away to safety. And we all know the story that there was this lovely lady called Flora MacDonald from the island of Lewis, who was actually in London at an education centre, and she was up visiting her father. One dress, one coat. In 1745, you know, you haven't got a big case full of clothes. So she was up there, she visited her father, and all of a sudden, a young lad comes and knocks on her dad's door and says, Flora, you have to go round to your brothers, you're needed desperately. So she rushed around and she says, what is it? And she walked inside the wee low-roof cottage, and there were several men, one called Clooney McPherson, another called the Raven Stewart, and there was other 2 or 3 lads. But right into the recess, this man stepped forward, and she saw that it was her king. And she went, oh, Your Majesty, why are you here? Every red coat in the land is looking for you. Your life, not only that, but your presence will close the fates on all the people here. You must get away. And he says, well, I am going away, he says, but this is the plan. And our brother said, we want to dress the prince as a woman. We're going to call him Betty Burke, an Irish maidservant of your own, Flora. And you can take him away across the sky. That everything's in place. Lookout stations, food and drink, and the boat's waiting to take him to the sky. Speed Bonnie boat, like a bird on a wing over the sea and sky. Well, she said, well, that's all very well, but I only have the one dress I own on my back. She said, I have no other clothes. Where are we going to dress? Now, if you come below the Mingus line in Scotland, Bonnie Prince Charlie is a wee widower man. But if you go up there, he's a big tall fellow like this. He's our king. But nevertheless, let's come halfway between, because Flora was about 5'3", and he was a wee bit taller than that. So how do you dress this man? Nobody has ever put this story into the history books. Flora MacDonald and Bonnie Prince Charlie, dressed as Betty Burke, did escape, but how did it happen? Well, here's where the little people come in. You know how William Wallace fought his battle? I never bothered about that. I was more wondering about who saddled his horse. Because if that horse hadn't been saddled, he would have fallen off. You know, when you get King Edward coming to do it, well, it's the little people, isn't it? All these wee ants that make history, that made everybody. We only read about the end product, but there's all these wee people that lead up to that. So Flora knew that there was a seamstress called Jeannie MacArthur who lived just a few hundred yards up the road. And she says to Jamie, go you, Jamie Stewart, and find her, tell her to bring her sewing basket. I mean, folk in the island said that this woman could sew the wings back on a seagull and it would fly away. She was so good with the needle and thread. Well, off he went, brought back wee Jeannie with her box, and when she went in and she saw the prince, she bowed and she said, Sire, you're in deep danger, you best get away from here. And they told her what they wanted her to do, and she says, well, I have no material, what am I going to use? So they took curtains and they took the covers off the beds, and the men took bits out of their clothes, and before the first light, Jeannie MacArthur had sewed a dress to Prince Charlie The dress fitted so well that there would have been no question as to that dress had been on him for several years. So well fitted. And he was given a bonnet, and away they went. Now when Flora and Bonnie Prince Charlie got to the boat to go over to Rassie and then over to Skye, he turned round and he says, Flora, Jeannie, will you come with Flora and I? And she says, I've got to get back, for one of my brothers has not come back from Culloden and my mother's worried sick. Come with us. He says, 3 women are safer than 2. So Jeannie MacArthur, it's not written in any of the books, she was in that wee boat with the 2 of them. Got on to Skye, the lookout people got them, fed them, watered them, and they got to a place called the Braes, about a mile outside Portree, when all of a sudden about 35 redcoats, grabbing troop of men, and they'd been drinking with the spoils of war and eating, and they were, well, here's 3 women, you know, females, let's help ourselves. Now Bonnie Prince Charlie already had a wee bit of the shadow on the face, and just a wee bit of moustache, and Flora looks at him, but Jeannie saw that first. She said, the minute they see you, we're dead, and my king is dead as well. So she bit, now this is the hardest thing that anybody can do, she bit the point of her tongue, and the blood oozed, and it oozed and ran down her face, and then she pretended to have a fit, and she threw her spine back, and she rolled about in the grass, and she's, ah! And Flora says, don't touch her, for heaven's sake, don't touch her, she has the plague. Now these lads just went, oh yeah, they're full of the drink now, Scottish plague, maybe a wee bit English plague, but no Scottish plague, you know. Oh, we'll grow heather and things like that. So away they went. And she saved the life of Bonnie Prince Charlie. And that you don't read about, because when they got onto the shoreline, and he turned round and he said, now this is in the rest of the books, and you go to Fort William, you can see this actually in the museum there. He took a wee lock of his hair and he cut it off and he gave it to Flora and she put it in a locket, and that's the locket that's in the museum. And he says, Madam, we may one day dance in St. James's. And she says, I think not, sire. As you know, Flora was put into the Tower of London and she had to get her freedom, and she married an American, and away she went across to the other side, and she came back and actually died there. But Jeannie's story does not enter into the books at all, because he turned round and he says to Jeannie, all that I have is 1 gold coin. Give me your hand, woman. And he put the gold coin in her hand and he closed her fingers. He says, even if the bread never is looking for your mouth, don't buy the bread with it. Keep it. And remember that you are the keeper of Scotland's gold. Jeannie MacArthur, her brother came back from the war, and she went into a nunnery, but before she did, she gave him the gold coin. And she says, never spend it, brother. She says, please, and hand it on to the next generation. And the MacArthurs kept that coin. Poor fisher folk, tinker folk, they kept the coin, and they never parted with the coin. And it went from one MacArthur to the other until it went to Margaret MacArthur. Margaret MacArthur married a man called Nicholas Power, and they had about 10 children. And they give that coin to Jeannie Power, who married Charlie Rowley, who was my father. That was the coin that my mother handed me that day on the beach, and I am now the keeper of that coin. And you can come up and examine it, because it's been examined by all the experts about coinage, and it dates from 1690, and it's a very, very old Spanish coin. And I have that coin in my hand. I can see my mother, you know, she never leaves. She's, like Sheila said, whenever she goes up on stage, there's Belle, and whenever I go up on stage, my mother's with me as well. She's a beautiful, beautiful woman with a lovely spirit. So, and a fantastic storyteller. Never ever used the word testicles, but fantastic. Let me share this wee story with you.